Well, in studio tonight we have the athletic director of Des Moines East High School. He is Rick Powell, and the reason we got him in here is because some changes coming up in the Central Iowa Metro League, and it's going to affect scheduling and what we look at things, and possibly some changes in the future, Rick, because we already know that Newton dropped from 4A to 3A. That started the ball rolling about changing the outlook of the Central Iowa Metro League. Ankeny decided we are growing too big. We needed to split up the high school, so they built a new high school. So that affected the change. We used to have the three conferences within the Central Iowa Metro League, the three divisions, the Metro, the Iowa, and the Central. And now you've went to four, and you've kind of split it up. Talk about the decision to go to the four divisions in the Central Iowa Metro League first. And thanks again for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Tony. It's been a long process, and it's been something that the CIML activities directors and athletic directors and principals have put a lot of time into. And we like you said, Newton dropped out of the CIML a few years ago, and luckily for us, Waukee was growing strong enough that they were an immediate replacement, and they've been a great fit for the league. And I know that the Ankeny thing has been something that was even talked about back when I was the athletic director at Ankeny for 4 years and had a great time in that town that was just really growing and really competitive in almost every sport. But I really commend the folks in Ankeny for building two beautiful new schools. The two schools, neither one of them will be at the high school that they're at currently. They've built two brand new high schools that's very modern and very great places for education for the kids in the Ankeny community. And the hard thing I think will be, as you know, that at some time they're going to have to split up their coaches, and some will go to the Ankeny Hawks, which are the south side of Ankeny, the town of Ankeny, and some will go to Centennial, which is on the north side. And you have so many great coaches at Ankeny High School currently that I'm not sure how they're going to work that out, and it might lead to some retirements from some famous coaches, but that'll be interesting to watch. But they've been so competitive that I think splitting them will just make them stronger eventually. But the Centennial team's been playing freshman activities this year. The East team has played both the Ankeny Hawks and the Ankeny Centennial team in baseball, and we did in basketball and some of the major sports already this year. And next year you'll see that happen with Ankeny having two teams in both the 9th and 10th grade level, and eventually, like I said, in 2012, get to the varsity level. But I need to clear up something, as far as terms. You're right, Indianola has joined the Metro Conference, and we're really, really thrilled to get a school like Indianola with all their strong tradition. And they've been so good in athletics to join the 5 Des Moines high schools in Ottumwa, and it's a natural fit. It's good for them. It's good for us. And so that's the first change is Indianola in 2012 will join the Metro. And we're called the Metro Conference. The other 12 schools form the Central Iowa Conference, or the CIC. And they have 3 divisions, okay? So there's 12 teams with 4 teams in each division, and they're called the CIC. So there's really only 2 conferences. There's a Metro Conference of 7, and the CIC, the Central Iowa Conference, of 12 schools, and those 12 schools are divided into 4 divisions. And the Eastern Conference are the 2 Ankeny schools, along with Southeast Polk and Waukee. The Western is Dowling Catholic, Johnston, Urbandale, and Valley. So the Dowling Valley matchup will always happen now. We don't have to worry about that. And the Northern Conference, the Northern Division will be, of course, the 4 schools from the north, which are Mason City, Fort Dodge, Marshalltown, and Ames. So there's three divisions of 4 to make up the CIC. And so there's 4 different groupings, you're right, but there's really 2 conferences.
So you want to confuse us in the media then, huh? New terminologies to learn.
No, but there's a lot of things besides just throwing names out there.
Sure.
Whenever you look at changes in a conference, and a lot of us, a lot of the discussion revolves around football because it's such a big sport, and that's where the money's made. So a lot of the talk amongst the ADs have been around football and the playoffs and things. But as I work with a lot of the other CIML ADs, we're some of the hardest things for us are, what do we do about conference records when we form a new 3 divisions? What are we going to do with the central records and the Iowa records for all these past 10, 12 years? What are we going to do with those records? I mean, if you only have 3 divisions where you're not playing everybody, can you still have records? So that's going to be a big issue. How are we going to select all conference teams? It won't be so hard for the Metro. We'll kind of just keep doing what we're doing, just adding Indianola. But from the CIC, are you going to have an all-conference team of 12 teams? That'd be a tough team to make. Or are you going to have by division And if you're only on an all-conference team of representing 4 teams, that's a little weak or a little bit not too many people to choose from. When you select 28 kids for a football all-conference team, and you only have 4 schools, you can kind of load up. So I think in the fall here in August, when we start meeting again with the CIML ADs, those issues will be discussed, along with how our championships determined. Are we going to have division championships or our CIC champion? Those tough issues. We're also taking time. I think it's a great time when you redesign a league, and I think the college level, we're seeing it in the Big Ten and the Big 12. Why does the Big Ten call themselves Big Ten when there's 12 schools now? They confuse a lot of people when there's 11 schools and now there's 12. But I think it's a good time for us at the high school level that may be more realistic as far as doing things that will work. Things like, okay, if we're starting from scratch, why not work with the Dowling Valley home and away? The Dowling Catholic and Valley football season, where they share Valley Stadium. Why don't we try to make it work that there's always one of those 2 teams at home and the other one's on the road, so they can share the stadium? Same thing with the 2 Ankeny schools. For a while, at least, they're going to be sharing the Ankeny football stadium that they currently have. Can we work it out, since we're starting from scratch, that the 2 Ankeny schools share the same stadium, where they each, if one's home, unless they're playing each other, one's home and the other one's away, and make it work out. And when you're starting from scratch, maybe we can do that. For East High School, where I'm from, it may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but for us that live it, we shared our stadium with Grandview University,
right.
The Vikings, and sometimes it's easier to have them on the road when we got a big homecoming weekend or something. It might be good for them when they have their homecoming activities or a big event that we're on the road. So there's things like that, variables that the most people don't have to worry about. That this is a good time this fall when we're really planning next year, the fall of 2012. Can we look at some of these important factors and make it a win-win for everybody?
Well, one of the questions I guess I would probably have to ask you, and I know we've kind of talked about it off the air, but for others, they might want to know the same thing. In the Metro Conference, as far as football goes, you can balance it out, but you have 7 teams, which means are they going to be meeting each other? That's 6 of your 9 scheduled football games, where when you look at the 4 divisions in the CIC, you're talking about only 3 games, and you're looking at 6 non-conference games. How is that scheduling going to all work out? Because you also not only have the league itself here in the central Iowa area, but you have the western half of the state to think about in the Sioux Cities and the Council Bluffs of the world when it comes to the non-conference western half of the state in football.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, because it's something that needs to get out there and for people to understand that in the sport of football, for sure, you will have your 2 conferences, like I'd explained. You have the 3 divisions in the CIC, and you have the Metro. You will not have a true champion, because of the fact you won't play. You're not guaranteed to play the other schools in your conference, and that's a little tough. But we this fall, when I say this fall, August and September meetings are going to somehow get this football schedule in place. And you're right, we have to include the schools from Council Bluffs and Sioux City that form the Missouri River Conference, which we promised to help them fulfill their schedule. The variable there is there's out of those teams, of those 5 schools, 4 of those 5 play 3A schools, and they play 2 games against 3A opponents. So we could sit here and make a draw and fill in spots in on a spreadsheet in little boxes, but if you don't know what weeks those schools have to play the 3A games, it really won't work. So we're kind of waiting to see, get some information from the Missouri River schools as to when they have to play those 3A games, and then we'll fill in the rest. But as far as getting back to how do we determine a championship, right now the only thing that we've worked out is the 5 Des Moines schools will play each other, which is good, but we're not necessarily going to be playing Indianola and Ottumwa. Ottumwa and Indianola got to choose a couple schools that they wanted to play, and luckily for us, Indianola chose East and Ottumwa chose Lincoln, and so those are their only. They play each other, so they have 3 games guaranteed. Ottumwa and Indianola will play each other for sure, and then they've each got to choose a couple schools. So the rest of those schools will draw the other 6 opponents amongst the group of CIML schools plus Missouri River schools that are in the pot, but the Des Moines schools are very fortunate, like I said, that people understood that it was important for the Des Moines schools to stay together, and we could have a city champion. But in football, like I said, we'll know who the strongest city school is from playing each other. But if you're not promised that you're going to be playing Indianola and Ottumwa, I don't know how we can have a true Metro champion. I guess we go out. I think the thing we're talking about with ADs is, of course, you use your one-loss record, but you'll also go by playoff points. Every school's decided the playoff points towards the end of the season by the Iowa High School Athletic Association. I think you'll get your standings that way, and your playoff qualifiers that way, of course. But the only thing guaranteed on the CIC are the 3 divisions will play the other 3 schools in the conference. So you have, division. You have those 4 schools, and they were guaranteed to play their division. Okay, so that's 3 games they're guaranteed. The other 6 games, like I said, it's going to be a draw. They can draw some Des Moines schools. They can draw some Missouri River schools. Now, the thing that people worry about is how much travel. How many you can really be making 2 trips to Sioux City in the same year. Or throwing to Mason City if you're a local team here in Central Iowa. That's expensive on your budget. Plus, when you play those schools at home, that's not usually a very good gate. So it financially is very stressful. So, like I said, Des Moines schools are fortunate that we know 4 of our opponents, because we're going to play the other. There's 5 schools in Des Moines. We're going to play the other 4. The 3 divisions are groups of 4. They'll play those 3 schools for sure. But there's going to be a lot of drawing to fill in the blanks, and that you may or may not have a true champion, because it's kind of like the Big Ten in football. Most people realize you don't play everybody else. That there's always a couple schools you don't play every year, and so you really don't have that. But they figured out the college level. They somehow have standings. They have ways of deciding who's going to go to the bowl games and stuff. So it'll work out. It's just going to be a challenge. It'll be hard for people to understand what's going on. I'm very fortunate there's programs or there's shows like Friday Night Lights that helps explain it to the people. And I think it's one of those things that it's going to take a couple of years for people to figure out what's going on and how often we're going to rotate, how often we're going to draw for opponents. And the other, we have 22 sports in high school. The other 21 sports are affected as well, not just football.
Right.
And we have to figure out how we're going to figure out, who's going to be having crossover games and how often you're going to play people out of your division or out of your conference. And it's going to, I think it's going to work out fine. The Ankeny schools will develop 2 great high schools, and Valley Dowling will now have to have the Battle of West Des Moines every year, because now they're going to be playing in the same division, so that'll create excitement. And it's really just going to be a change. I don't think the change is bad. I think it's and we have to be prepared for in the future. Waukee's growing pretty strong, and Valley's always one of the largest schools in the states. Will they ever have 2 schools? And will a Dallas Center Grimes or Norwalk ever be large enough to join?
Or maybe even a Boone up in the northern part.
Yeah. So I mean, we know that down the road, 5 years from now, the variables will change, and we will have different things to consider. But again, we look at this as a challenge and a way to clean up a few things at the same time. Maybe starting some new rivalries and keeping the old rivalries that we have intact as well.
It changes this for us curmudgeons. We just don't want to go through that at our stage in life. We got kind of used to things, but in reality, every 2 years there's change when it comes to the scheduling, especially in football. There's redistricting from 3A down to 8-player. I mean, this year alone, there's like 10 teams. We're talking about in the smaller classes that they're no longer going to have a football program or a school. I mean, after last year. So, and those things are happening yearly, and we have to get used to those. Or consolidations where teams are now going to be playing this year, but are not eligible because now they're in a bigger class. But because the next district assignments till next year, they are just playing a football season, which means nothing but for the love of the game. Yeah. And those are interesting choices that have to be made. They're tough choices. It's unfortunate for some and fortunate for others, but it just makes it very tough. Going back to the CIC, CIML restructuring here, in the past, the champions of the leagues, whether the Central, Iowa, or Metro, got the automatic home bid, and the Missouri River Conference out west got the automatic home playoff game to start the playoffs in football. The rest of the sports, they all work themselves out because everybody plays, whether they're 0-50 or 50-0, whatever sport. Everybody competes in the postseason, but in football it's a little different because not everybody qualifies. Are those things still going to remain the same since you said there's not a true Metro champion?
I think in 2012, Tony, that you will not see automatic qualifiers for conference champions because, like I said, you won't be able to determine who your conference champion is because you won't be playing everybody else. But I think the best teams will qualify, and I think the best teams will rise to the top like they always do. And I think it won't be that big of a change. You'll see the same teams you're used to seeing in the playoffs get there repeatedly. It used to be the Central Conference in football was just something that was a monster, and you could be the 6th place team in the Central Division and be very, very good, and that's been proven. But you look at right now the Western Division of the CIC, Dowling Catholic, Valley, Johnston, Urbandale. Wow, I mean, they're going to have to strap it up every night. And how about the Eastern Conference with the two Ankeny schools and Southeast Polk and Waukee? So, I think that'll will be the only way to determine your playoff teams will be the playoff points that the association develops, and there's a reason they do it that way. And whether all four teams from the Western Division make it, and maybe not too many from the Metro, that'll have to be played out, and a lot of it will be determined on who we draw in our games that are up in the air right now. If you get teams that you can compete with and get some wins and get yourself up on that list of points, it'll work out. If you draw some of the Western Division teams and they're really, really strong, you might take your lumps, but it'll be fun. I'm not, all of us are worried about the fact we, financially might have to make some multiple trips to Sioux City or Council Bluffs, but that we share a league and we share responsibilities. And like I said, we were used to being a conference of 6 teams where you had 5 opponents automatically and you drew for 4 other spots. Now there's 12 schools that are in 4 divisions of 4 schools where they're drawing 6 spots. Des Moines are still drawing the 4 spots. So it is and it isn't a big change. I mean, it's still the same people you're going to be playing. We fill our schedule all the time with CIML schools, and we will in 2012. But it's just different, and I don't think different's bad. And I think we have so much great leadership amongst the athletic directors in our league. We have so much experience from all the great people that take this very seriously. They take it personal because they're all looking after their own financial gate receipts and the transportation costs, and it's tough. It's a tough economy. It's hard for any school to make trips where they have to be in a bus for 2 hours, and the expense not only the expense of the bus, but loss of school time. Kids getting back home from a trip, at midnight or even later, and have to go to school the next day. Those are all issues that it'll be a challenge for all of us to try to keep our kids interested and keep up with the pace.
Well, we got to take a break and pay our great advertisers to keep this program going every Friday night. And we'll take a break. We're going to come back and close it out with Rick Powell. I want to ask you a couple questions real quick when we come back about the concussion issues and exactly the process that's going to go through with that. That's a major issue when it comes to especially the football season coming up. Back with more Friday Night Live after this time out on the ISC Radio and Television Network.
Will be on the line July 4th through 10th.